this episode, we take the asset threat vulnerability map you have already built and add the concept that ties it all together: risk. Cybersecurity is not just about identifying problems. It is about deciding which problems matter most and what to do about them. Risk gives you a structured way to make those decisions. At its simplest, risk is the possibility that a threat will exploit a vulnerability and cause harm to an asset. But in practice, risk involves judgment about probability, severity, and acceptable trade-offs. The GISF exam frequently tests whether you can think in terms of likelihood and impact rather than reacting emotionally to technical details. Our goal here is to make risk analysis feel logical and repeatable instead of abstract and intimidating. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Let's start with a working definition. Risk is commonly described as the combination of likelihood and impact. Likelihood refers to how probable it is that a threat will successfully exploit a vulnerability. Impact refers to the magnitude of harm if that exploitation occurs. If likelihood is high and impact is high, the risk is high. If likelihood is low and impact is low, the risk is low. The important point is that both factors matter. A rare event with catastrophic consequences may still deserve attention, while a frequent event with minimal harm may not justify major investment. On the exam, when you see questions about prioritization, you should immediately think about how likelihood and impact interact. Likelihood is not just a guess. It is informed by context. Factors that influence likelihood include how exposed an asset is, how attractive it is to attackers, and how many vulnerabilities exist. For example, a publicly accessible web server with known unpatched software flaws has a higher likelihood of compromise than an isolated internal system with strong access controls. User behavior also affects likelihood, such as whether employees frequently click on suspicious links. When analyzing a scenario, look for clues about exposure, attacker capability, and existing weaknesses. These clues help you reason about probability without needing exact statistics. You are not calculating precise percentages. You are comparing relative levels of risk. Impact, on the other hand, focuses on consequences. If an event occurs, what happens next? Does the organization lose revenue, face regulatory fines, suffer reputational damage, or experience operational downtime? Impact can be financial, legal, operational, or reputational, and often it is a combination of several types. For example, a breach involving sensitive customer data might lead to legal penalties and loss of customer trust. A system outage during peak business hours might result in immediate revenue loss. When evaluating impact in exam scenarios, think beyond the technical failure and consider the broader business consequences. This business-oriented thinking often points you to the correct answer. It is helpful to understand that risk can be expressed qualitatively or quantitatively. In a qualitative approach, risks are categorized as high, medium, or low based on judgment and comparison. In a quantitative approach, risks are estimated using numerical values such as expected financial loss. For beginners and for many foundational exam questions, qualitative reasoning is sufficient. You compare scenarios and decide which presents greater potential harm. The key is consistency in your reasoning rather than mathematical precision. When you see options that mention prioritizing certain risks, think about which combination of likelihood and impact makes the strongest case for action. Now let's move from understanding risk to deciding what to do about it. Risk treatment refers to the strategies organizations use to address identified risks. There are 4 primary approaches: risk avoidance, risk mitigation, risk transfer, and risk acceptance. Risk avoidance means eliminating the activity that creates the risk. For example, if a company chooses not to store certain sensitive data, it avoids the risk associated with protecting it. Risk mitigation means implementing controls to reduce likelihood or impact. Installing security patches or deploying access controls are examples of mitigation. Risk transfer involves shifting the financial impact to another party, often through insurance or contractual agreements. Risk acceptance means acknowledging the risk and deciding not to take additional action, usually because the cost of mitigation exceeds the potential harm. Risk avoidance is the most straightforward conceptually, but often the most difficult in practice. Eliminating a risky activity may also eliminate business opportunities. For example, refusing to offer online services would reduce certain cyber risks, but would also limit revenue and customer reach. Therefore, avoidance is usually chosen only when the risk is clearly unacceptable or not aligned with business goals. On the exam, if a question describes discontinuing a vulnerable service entirely to eliminate exposure, that is an example of avoidance. It is not the same as mitigation, which reduces but does not eliminate risk. Risk mitigation is the most common treatment strategy. It involves applying controls that lower either the likelihood of an incident or its impact. For instance, implementing multi-factor authentication reduces the likelihood of unauthorized access, while maintaining regular backups reduces the impact of ransomware. Mitigation does not guarantee that an incident will never occur, but it changes the risk profile in a favorable way. When exam questions ask for the best way to reduce risk, they are often looking for a mitigation control that directly addresses the identified vulnerability. Choosing a control that is loosely related but not targeted may not be the best answer. Risk transfer is sometimes misunderstood. Transferring risk does not eliminate it. It shifts the financial consequences to another entity. Purchasing cyber insurance is a common example. If a breach occurs, the insurance may cover certain costs. However, the operational disruption and reputational damage still affect the organization. Therefore, transfer is often combined with mitigation rather than used alone. In exam scenarios, if an option involves outsourcing certain responsibilities or purchasing insurance to manage potential losses, that likely represents risk transfer. It is important to distinguish this from mitigation, which directly reduces the technical or operational exposure. Risk acceptance is a deliberate decision, not neglect. Organizations accept risk when the cost of mitigation exceeds the expected benefit or when the risk level falls within their tolerance. For example, a minor vulnerability in a low-value system may not justify significant investment to fix immediately. Acceptance should be documented and reviewed periodically because risk conditions can change. On the exam, if a scenario describes acknowledging a low-impact issue and choosing to monitor it rather than implement new controls, that reflects risk acceptance. It is not the same as ignoring risk. It is a conscious trade-off. Risk tolerance plays an important role in treatment decisions. Risk tolerance is the level of risk an organization is willing to accept in pursuit of its objectives. Different organizations have different tolerances based on their industry, regulatory environment, and strategic priorities. A financial institution handling sensitive transactions may have low tolerance for data breaches, while a small startup may accept more operational risk to innovate quickly. Understanding tolerance helps explain why not all risks are treated the same way. In exam questions, context often hints at tolerance levels, guiding you toward the most appropriate treatment strategy. Another key concept is residual risk, which is the risk that remains after controls are implemented. No control is perfect, so mitigation reduces but does not eliminate risk. The goal is to reduce risk to an acceptable level rather than to zero. This idea connects back to the foundation that cybersecurity is about managing risk, not eradicating it entirely. When evaluating answer choices, remember that the presence of controls does not mean risk disappears. Instead, it shifts and often becomes smaller or less likely. Recognizing this helps you avoid answers that imply unrealistic perfection. Effective risk management also requires prioritization. Organizations rarely have unlimited resources, so they must focus on the most significant risks first. Prioritization often involves comparing likelihood and impact across multiple scenarios. For example, a highly likely phishing attack affecting many users may deserve more immediate attention than a low-probability technical exploit. On the exam, if asked which issue to address first, think about which combination of factors creates the greatest overall risk. Avoid being distracted by technical complexity. Focus on consequence and probability. Communication is another important part of risk fundamentals. Security professionals must explain risks in a way that business leaders understand. That means translating technical vulnerabilities into business impact, such as financial loss or reputational damage. Clear communication supports informed decision-making about risk treatment. Even as a beginner, practicing this translation strengthens your understanding. When you can describe how a vulnerability might affect revenue or compliance, you demonstrate integrated thinking. This integration is often what exam questions are designed to assess. To conclude, risk in cybersecurity is the combination of likelihood and impact, and effective security decisions depend on understanding both. Likelihood reflects the probability of a threat exploiting a vulnerability, while impact reflects the severity of resulting harm. Organizations treat risk through avoidance, mitigation, transfer, or acceptance, guided by their risk tolerance and available resources. Controls reduce risk, but rarely eliminate it completely, leaving residual risk that must be managed. When you analyze scenarios, prioritize based on the greatest overall risk rather than the most dramatic technical detail. If you carry one decision rule forward, let it be this. Whenever faced with a security choice, evaluate how it changes likelihood or impact and select the treatment strategy that best aligns risk reduction with business objectives.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.